And good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I do hope you're having a fantastic week. Here we are. Good grief. November is just going whoof, poof, it's gone. It's incredible. Okay, I want to get right into our lesson this morning. This will be part 2 in our examination comparing Acts chapter 1 with Daniel chapter 7. Now, I want to tell you right up front, in my early years, I adamantly believed, and I taught repeatedly, that Acts chapter 1 is the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7. Now, mind you, I took that position because that's the position that I was taught. That's the position that I heard from the pulpits, in the lectureships, and in the books that I read. I had never actually studied Daniel 7 myself. Never. When I began to look at Daniel chapter 7 critically, analytically, contextually, I realized that Daniel 7 has nothing to do with Acts chapter 1. And I have to tell you, I was somewhat stunned. And by the way, on my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, I had a video debate with Mr. William Vincent, who took the position that the ascension of Christ in Acts chapter 1 was the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7. Well, I have to tell you, that didn't turn out real well with him. That debate is also it's also on YouTube, so just go to YouTube and look up debate on Daniel chapter 7. Vincent versus Preston debate on Daniel 7, 13, and 14. I think you'll be quite enlightened by that debate. Mr. Vincent made some absolutely fatal admissions, particularly from Revelation chapter 1, 12 and following, that when I made the point, he never said another word about it. Literally never said one word. He was entrapped by his own admissions, by his own words. Completely entrapped. But enough of that at the moment. So, I urged you yesterday to consider, if we take Daniel chapter 7, 1 through 14, as a chronological narrative, okay? One event following another. And look, we have no reason not to, because after all, you have the first kingdom arising, the second kingdom arising, the third kingdom, the fourth kingdom, the little horn. That's all sequential, right? Okay. That being true, then how is it that anyone could suggest that Daniel 7 is fulfilled in Acts chapter 1? And here's why. In Daniel chapter 7, when does the coming of the Son of Man take place? Well, according to the narrative, according to the text, let's see. Verse 11. I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words, which the horn, that's the little horn that arose, verse 8, that manifested itself as the persecuting power. So this is the little horn, because of which the thrones were set, the books were opened, the Ancient of Days took his place to enter into judgment of the little horn. But then you see, verse 13 and 14, we have the coming of the one like the Son of Man. Now, if we're going to take this as a chronological sequence, temporal events follow here, here, then guess what? If you make Daniel 7 applied to the ascension, then Christ didn't ascend to the Father until after the destruction of the little horn. The little horn who persecuted the saints. Now, I was involved in a rather lengthy Facebook internet discussion with a former preterist about this. And when I pointed out that his position now demands that the little horn arose before Acts chapter 1, what did he do? Oh, he invented, literally invented out of thin air, the idea that Daniel 7, 11 to 14, and kind of vacillated back and forth between Daniel 7, 13, and 14. But the point that he was making is these verses are parenthetical. They don't have to be taken in sequence. These verses in the vision of the coming of the Son of Man to receive the kingdom don't have anything to do with the judgment of the little horn. They are an, oh, by the way, insertion into the vision. Argumentum ad desperatum. You know, I've looked and I've looked and I've looked in the commentaries, and I cannot find. Now, hey, I might have missed something. There's so much literature out there. It's certainly possible that I may have missed a commentary from some point of time in history in which the commentator said, hey, look, verses 13 and 14 don't belong with the rest of the narrative. They're just an insertion. They are an interpolation. They are a parenthetical insertion. And again, I may have missed something. That's always possible. It's not possible to know what every single commentator says. But in all of my years of study, I have never encountered a single commentator who ever suggested that Daniel 7, 13, and 14, especially, were a parenthetical insertion into the text unrelated. And so one argument that is given is, well, you got to go back here to Daniel chapter 7, where Daniel was told Daniel had a dream and visions, plural. Ah, see, there you go, we are told. It's visions, plural. Well, the problem with that is, in the earlier chapters of Daniel, the word visions and the word dreams in the multiple form is used to refer to a singular vision and a singular dream. This is just Hebrew language, ladies and gentlemen. This is trying to make a mountain out of a molehill without any justification whatsoever, other than desperation to avoid the significance of following the narrative of Daniel chapter 7. Let me say this again, ladies and gentlemen. If you follow the strictly chronological form of the narrative of Daniel chapter 7, the Son of Man comes after the judgment of the little horn who has been killing the saints of the Most High. Well, okay, then, if Acts chapter 1 is the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7, then that means at the ascension, the persecuting power of the little horn was judged and destroyed. But wait a minute. Well, it's certainly true that Israel had persecuted the prophets down through the centuries. Daniel 7 is dealing with the little horn who was active in the days of the Roman Empire. Not in the days of Persia as the persecutor. The temporal focus is on the days of the Fourth Empire. Do you catch the power of that? Does it deny that the little horn persecuted the saints prior to that? No, it's simply talking about the days of the Roman Empire. That's the temporal focus. So, if you're going to argue that Daniel 7 depicts the ascension of Christ in fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7, then you must be able to prove definitively, irrefutably, that Daniel 7, 13 and 14 is in fact an interpolation. It is a parenthetical insertion into the text, and you must be able to prove that from this text. But then, of course, you fly in the face of the interpretation, of the vision that is found in Daniel 7, 15 and following. I don't have time to go into that this morning, but let me just simply point something out to you. The detractors, and those who so adamantly claim that the ascension of Christ was the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7. I find it interesting that these are the kind of people who constantly appeal to the patristic writers and to the early church. Well, I want you to listen very carefully to what Craig Keener. Now, Craig Keener wrote a massive 4-volume set of a commentary on the book of Acts. In volume 1, and by the way, this was published in 2012, and on page 720 of volume 1, Craig Keener says this, quote, "Early Christians found in Jesus' ascension fulfillment of Psalms 110, verse 1. Well, wait a minute. Mr. Keener, you must be wrong here. You surely mean to say that early Christians found in Jesus' ascension the fulfillment of Daniel 7. No, that's not what he says. And he says this is explicit in Luke 20:42, Mark 12:36, Matthew 22:44, and Hebrews 1, verse 13. Exemplified also in this context of Acts 2, 33 through 34, and compare Acts 7, 55 and 56. They also cite the authority of Jesus for the use of this text in Mark 12:36, Mark 14:62, and in Luke's story, Jesus is the source for the early Christians' biblical theology surrounding his exaltation. Again, Luke 20:42, Luke 22:69. Listen, folks, do you catch the power of what he's saying? He's saying that the early church, those patristic writers, they saw Jesus' ascension not as the fulfillment of Daniel 7, but of Psalms 110. Do you realize that Psalms 110 is quoted or alluded to, echoed, cited 33 times in the New Testament, ladies and gentlemen? Now watch this, as Keener says in footnote number 645 on the same page, page 720, quote, "Most New Testament writers who refer to the ascension do so only by way of Psalms 110, verse 1. Well, now wait a minute. Brother Keener, surely you're wrong here. Surely. I mean, this is, after all, what all the anti-preterists tell us. So, Mr. Keener, obviously you're wrong. You haven't been listening to the anti-preterists enough who tell us that Daniel 7 is the background source for the ascension. No, Keener is not wrong, as a matter of fact. He says, once again, quote, "Most New Testament writers who refer to the ascension do so only by way of Psalms 110 and verse 1. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that the early church and the New Testament writers did not see Daniel 7 in Acts 1. They saw Psalms 110. And by the way, this has been my position for some years now, once I realized that Daniel 7 is not talking about the ascension. Okay, tomorrow, Thursday, I'm going to try to wrap up our examination of Acts chapter 1 in regard to Daniel chapter 7. And we're going to look at the interpretation of the vision of Daniel 7, 1 to 14. Ladies and gentlemen, read it. Read the interpretation of the vision for yourself and figure out what the God of heaven had to say about the interpretation of the vision. It's amazing. I'll see you on the flip side.